The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show, the home of geek, folklore and paranormal entertainment, with me, Charles Christian, as once again we delve into the worlds of weirdness, urban myths, history, geek culture, ghosts, magic, witchcraft, the occult, and anything else I think will intrigue you. This week we have another big interview coming up, and once again we are talking about UFOs. So let's just set the scene and put everything into a little context. Project Blue Book, which we talked about last week, found that while around 80% of all UFO sightings could be explained away in terms of high-flying aircraft, satellites, weather balloons, the planet Venus seen at an unusual angle, and even swamp gas, the remaining 20% defied explanation and identification. But, according to the American military, they were definitely not alien flying saucers. Good, hope we got that clear. Needless to say, this left many people dissatisfied with Project Blue Book's findings. Fast forward 50 years, and on the 25th of June this year, the Pentagon released its much-anticipated report to the US Congress on Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, or UAP. Yes, it's the 21st century, so the humble UFO has been rebranded. The report discusses, very briefly, 144 UAP sightings and suggests some may be advanced drones belonging to either China or Russia, but only positively identifies one object, a weather balloon. So basically the Pentagon report is even more useless than Project Blue Book. We therefore decided to talk to this week's guest, Joe Montaldo, who, as a former US Navy avionics and electronics whiz, not only knows a lot about military technology, but was even serving on a US aircraft carrier when it was visited by a mystery craft that looked a lot like a flying saucer. Though now retired from the Navy, Joe continues to follow developments in technology, is the host of a number of American radio shows, and he researches alien abduction stories. What I'd like to talk about, particularly as I notice on your Facebook bio that you've worked with the US Navy in electronics and avionics, about that report that came out last week on the UFOs.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I brought this up a few weeks ago. My security clearance for the Nimitz finally cleared. Nimitz seems to have been ET's favorite landing port for quite some time. I know of 5 events that happened on there. I know one when I was there, and when it happened. So, you know, I was a plane captain. Well, plane captain's basically the guy in charge of everything on the deck when the airplanes are up there.
Right.
So if you ever see the guy standing off to the right, launching the planes and making sure everything's going on, that was my job. So I had to make sure everything was ready to go. So anyway, long story short, we're on the deck, we're launching. We're doing what they call a touch and go. So we're launching, they're coming in, they touch, they go up, they touch, they go back off, they run right off the carrier again. So we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear the alarm to bring the planes in. So I'm like, okay, we weren't scheduled to bring the planes in for 8 or 10 hours. So I was like, all right, well, we're bringing them. So we're bringing the planes in. I'm landing planes, sending them down the elevator, getting them out the way. We finally get the last plane in, and then I get the alarm, clear the deck. I'm like, why the hell are we clearing the deck? There's nothing going on for us to clear the deck. And so I'm sending guys off the deck, and about 15 minutes later, I hear a landing alarm. I'm like, what the hell? We have nothing in the air. So I'm thinking maybe a VP's coming in. Maybe that's why they cleared the deck. Well, off in the distance, you start seeing this silverish glimmering thing. As it approaches a carrier, you kind of started to make it out. This was a huge saucer. So this thing comes in, hovers over the front deck. Now, we're still at speed. All of a sudden, as it got closer, everything on the carrier went dead. I mean, everything went dead. Elevators, you name it, everything went off. And the carrier just kind of lunged forward as it stopped, or as it was slowing down. So the carrier comes almost to a complete stop, and this thing comes over. It's hovering over the front deck. It just comes down and it sits down on the deck. Now you got to remember, this thing's hanging over both sides of the deck quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever was piloting this thing was really good, and it pushed the front of the carrier down considerably. Now, if we'd have been in rough seas, it might have sunk our asses. So I'm looking at this thing going, what is this, some new, and I'd heard, I was only 18 at the time, so I've heard about UFOs and stuff, but I don't really know anything about it, other than pilots saying, oh, we seen this weird thing, or we seen that weird thing, whatever it was. So this thing sits down on the deck, and it goes low, and I hear the captain come on. He's just bitching us out. Whoever's on the deck, get off the deck now. So, all right, I'm like, I don't want to get kicked off the carrier, so I start walking to the elevator. When I see a hatch open up, I said, well, I get in the elevator, I'm going down. I get down to the bottom where the hangar is. I get out and I see two of my friends staring at an up top monitor, which all the other monitors were off, but that one, which was kind of weird. You see what appears to be, and they seen it. I did not. When I walked up this event, they were already going into the spaceship. So it looked like. The guy said it looked like this. He described the alien to me that was standing at the end of the flap, and the only thing I could tell you was probably one of those 6 or 7 foot grays.
Mm-hmm.
Then he describes the president of the United States, who was currently Ronald Reagan,
Mm-hmm.
going on board this thing. And I said, "Oh, I said, you're just effing with me. You just blah 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 blah." So I got some friends in the conning tower because being advanced electronics. I worked every part of the ship from the reactor room to the conning tower. I had a above top secret clearance. Class 10 is what they call it. That's probably higher than a freaking president had. I mean, because of the things I've seen from the weapon systems to the conning tower to the nuclear reactors, I was probably one of the few guys that got to see all of it because everybody's assigned duties.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sitting there, no way. And we sat there, didn't see. With barely anything working. Some of the electronics came back on, but not a lot. No propulsion whatsoever. We're just sitting there. Now, we got to remember, this is the USS Nimitz. We're basically a target at this point. And there's a big steel rock floating around in the ocean is basically what we had. It never lifted off until these people came back out of the thing. Now, when I noticed you see the hatch reopen,
Mm-hmm.
looks like humans walking out, everything went dead. They flipped the monitors off. From the conning tower, they flipped them off, and I know I went back up on the elevator because I told my commander, I said, "Oh, I forgot some on the deck. I got to go get it in case a plane comes in, it might suck it up." So I said, "All right, get up." So I go up there. I get up there. I got up there just in time to see what it looked like. I couldn't make out the humans without that camera. You couldn't make out who they were. Walking back to the conning tower, this thing starts to lift off the carrier. You can feel the carrier shift as it's lifting up because the carrier starts lifting up from the weight being removed from it.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of lifts up, it hovers over the carrier for a few seconds, it starts to drift off. As it starts to drift off, everything starts coming on carrier power, everything starts coming on, and poof, it was gone that fast, man. I mean, literally. It didn't streak off. That's what was so weird about this thing. It kind of went like it was going to zip out, and it just was gone like a blink. I don't know if it was moving that fast that you couldn't make it out with the naked eye, or some kind of portal opened up and it went in it. But so, long story short, commander gets on the number 2 gets on the deck, or number 1 gets on the conning, and he goes, "All right, 2,500 of y'all are going to have to sign non-disclosure agreements for 35 years." I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah." So there was only 200 people that actually witnessed this event, but they made everybody who was awake, because half the crew was asleep.
Mm-hmm.
The night shift was asleep at the time. And so they made everybody sign these things before they could even get off the ship to port. As you were trying to get off, they were making you sign it. And I asked the number 1, I said, "What is this new craft we're testing?" He said, "Joe, mind your own business." His words. And I'm like, but he said, "Yeah, y'all seen too much, and I can't tell you what it is." He said, "Because honestly, Joe, I don't know what it is." He said, I had to sign an agreement too. He said, I'm just as in the dark as you are. And this is the number 1 on the ship. He's right behind the captain, and he don't know shit."
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm kind of confused at this point. A couple of days go by. The captain comes down to the enlisted men's mess, which never happens. And he said, "I wanted to tell everybody who worked on this day, blah, 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 blah. Y'all did a great job." He said, "I'm real proud of y'all and keeping this secret." He said, "Before anybody asks me, I don't know any more than you do." He said, "All I know is we had VPs on board. I can't tell you who they were, but they were big VPs, and they met whatever this craft was. We don't know if it was ours or somebody else's. They met for a couple of hours, and then they came back and they left. He said, "I wish I could tell you more." He said, "If I knew, because you're gonna all have to sign these agreements, I would tell you." He said, "I just don't know." Now, this is the guy at the time. The Nimitz was the most powerful ship afloat in any navy,
Mm-hmm.
the largest, most powerful thing in the ocean, except for the Enterprise. And you're kind of like, "What?
Hmm.
You mean you don't know? You don't know who the hell was on your own ship?" And he was just as pissed as we were. You could see it in his face. He was just as pissed. Now, from what I understand, later on, he found out that it was the president of the United States, and it did get through. Just before I got shipped home, I got called in for a briefing, and he said, "Look," he said, "I know y'all know who it is because the cameras were on at the time. The front cameras were on at the time." He said, "I know some of y'all seen this." He said, "So I'm confirmed that this was the president of the United States. It wasn't a lookalike. It wasn't nothing else." He said, "I couldn't tell you who he was meeting with. I couldn't tell you if they were aliens or some Russian thing or something else that we didn't know about." He said, "But anyway, you're not going to be able to talk about it." So, and it was so funny because I had forgot all about it. I'm not kidding. I'm a ufologist, but it kind of just went to the back of my brain. And a friend of mine calls me a couple of weeks ago. He said, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" He said, "Our non-disclosure agreements are over."
Ah.
So, but for me, it's different because I have a class 10 security clearance. That never goes away. You have it for life. It never goes. Matter of fact, every 4 years since I was 18, the FBI does a background check on me every 4 years. And I didn't even know they were doing that until Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, because I own a construction company. And I had an FBI guy who was a forensics expert, and he had retired, but he ran my name through the FBI before he let me do the work in his house. So when I came out to sign the contract with him, he goes, "Joe, who the fuck are you?" He said, "Why are they doing a background check on you every 4 years?" He said, "That's a rare thing." He said, "You really got to be somebody." I said, "I'm a nobody. I just got a really high clearance." I said, "I used to work on the jets." I said, "I worked on the jets. I worked in the reactor room, and I worked in the Tonnin Tower." I said, "I was in all the sensitive places aboard the USS Nimitz." I said, "So I had to have a really, really high security clearance because I could tell you how the nuclear reactors work, which the Russians would have loved to know. I could tell you all the equipment on board the Tonnin Tower because I worked on it, from all of our anti-missile defense and to everything else. I worked on it. I could tell you everything about the jets because I worked on them." And so I had to have a really, really high clearance. And it was just weird to find out they were still doing. And I checked just recently; they're still doing them. I'm 58 years old, and they're still running these background checks on me. And when I first started hosting Wake Up USA, which we retired, oh God, like 16 years ago, I got sanctioned, which is just a warning not to talk about something. I got a call from the FBI. I was talking about advanced EMP shielding. So most people that know our aircraft back then had, shielding for electric, for pulse.
Yeah.
Mainly because if they're in an area when a nuclear blast goes on, the EMP would, wipe out the jet, all the electronics, it would crash.
Yeah.
So they had shielding around all the electronics. And I didn't even know what it was when I first got there. I had to go ask somebody. I said, "Why do we have these plates in front of the electronics?" Because it made a real pain in the ass to work on the electronics. He said, "That's EMP shielding." I'm like, "Really?" So, and we also found that later on that both Russia and China were developing EMP weapons. Well, we would have them ourselves, but I was surprised that they sanctioned me for it. So I talked about, a guy had come on and had told me, he called me up at home. He said, "Hi, I'm such and such with the FBI." He said, "Recently you had talked about this." He said, "We're sanctioning you. We're going to put it on your record. You can't talk about this." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He said, "Joe, nobody knows yet." I said, "Dude, it's been 20 years. He said, "I'm telling you, nobody knows yet." So I'm thinking, okay, nobody knows. Like, don't tell me the Russians didn't already know this, because I know damn good and well they did. And I was like, okay. I said, I won't do it. But one of the things that got me interested in ufology, of course, that was a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But even after that, I wasn't all that gung ho about it. I was thinking maybe I should just stay out of this field because, well, pilots, I'm not kidding you. So we'd sit in a line shack and we'd be talking, and these pilots would tell us about all this weird shit they'd seen. And I mean, they had seen all kind of hairy, scary stuff, man. They would say they would get buzzed. I said, "Well, I thought the Foo Fighters went away." He said, "Apparently they haven't." He said, "We're just not allowed to report them outside of the Navy." And the Navy required them to report them. See, I was always under the influence that the Navy didn't care. Well, that was not true. If you had an encounter like that, the Navy wanted you to report it. They wanted to know what kind of speeds they were doing, what kind of maneuvers they were doing. And what's hairy scary about that today is a lot of our drones can reproduce the things that like the Foo Fighters did in the 50s and what they've done in the 70s and 80s, but they can't achieve those kind of speeds. So they can do those weird flips and those wraparound and things because, they're drones. I mean,
Hmm.
they don't have any humans in them, so drones can do a lot more than a craft with a human in it can do. But they could not achieve the speeds. These things, one of the pilots told me he was in an F-18 Hornet. Now, I'm not going to get into what top speed is, but anyway, we'll tell you it's over Mach 2. And he said they would blow like up by us like we were sitting still. He said you couldn't even get a shot at because all your electronics. And he said it was funny. He said, it would only jam the electronics for the weapons. He said the radars were still intact, but somehow or another they knew where our weapon systems were. They would jam me, whether it was machine guns, because a lot of them carried 50 cal or 20 cal Gatling guns is what we called them,
Hmm.
because they're basically what they were as Gatling guns. I mean, these things would spit down bullets at a rate. It was unbelievable. He said, but none of that would work. He said they would zip by and then they'd come sit in front of us like hovering. They would hover but keep pace with the speed of the plane so the plane wouldn't hit them. He said it was the damnedest thing I've ever seen. He said most of them were saucers. He said every time you'd see some orbs or something. He said, but it was just scary, hairy to think there was something out there flying. He said, I would always go ask my commander, is that the Russians? He said, hell no, that ain't the Russians. The Russians can barely fly a jet. Do you think they really can do this? And he said, no, it's not who it is. He said, we don't know who it is. Nobody wants to talk about who it is or what it is. He said, all I can tell you is these things really, really blow out speeds that no one can really comprehend. And they call them UFOs. And every now and then, the Nimitz would report an underwater UFO. It would just come sailing out from crazy stuff. So the pilot said, yeah, you'd see this green glow in the water. And then you could tell it was under the carrier because all under the carrier would glow green. And all of a sudden, they'd just shoot out in front of the carrier, just kind of hover in front of the carrier and then take off. It was teasing them. It's just basically saying, nah, you ain't got a prayer against us. I really think a lot of it was just to let the military know, look, we're very advanced. If we wanted to wipe you out, we could do it easily.
Mhm.
Please don't shoot at us because we will shoot back. And it's just hairy, scary, and more and more pilots. So when I got discharged into reserve duty, I got assigned to a place called Alvin Callender Field out of New Orleans. And we used to hear these pilots talk about, because a lot of these pilots were reserved. They had served, 8 or 10 years, and they would come back and they would talk about all the shit they seen. I'm like, wow, that's just crazy. And you would have thought that would have been enough to get me into ufology, but it still wasn't. I was like 19, 20 at the time, maybe 21. I started meeting these people out of the blue who were telling me they were having abductions. I'm like, so my first thought, Charles, was, yeah, y'all need to seek professional help soon.
Yeah.
I said, really? There's no aliens abducting y'all. Get the hell out of here. Why would an alien want to abduct someone like you? And then I got to realizing something. Some of these people were in key positions. The first woman I met was this woman was making $200,000, $300,000 a year. Back then was a lot of money. That's like a mill today. She had a family, she had a husband, she had friends. If this stuff would have came out, she'd have lost her whole career, probably her family, probably everything.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had a politician who I knew personally because I used to play darts with him. He starts telling me, I don't know what the hell, would I have a face that people want to tell me they've been abducted by aliens? I couldn't even understand that part. And he starts telling me about these aliens coming in his house, taking him and his kids. I'm like, dude, I said, you're running for a council position? Maybe you should retire. I said, he's like, no, Joe. I said, I know you don't believe me. So by the time I was around 22, about 10 or 12 of these stories had been told to me. This and what happened on the Nimitz was enough to really drive me into getting into this field. But it always amazed me how many of these things buzz the carrier. I mean, every time, and even today, I was talking to a friend of mine who's on the George Washington, not the George Washington, the George Bush, and he said it's still going on today. He said they still come by at high speeds and buzz the carrier. He said he remembered when the carrier was first deployed, one came by and buzzed him, and they scrambled all the jets. They thought it was like maybe a Russian or a Chinese jet. But it wasn't, of course. It was something else. They could never catch up with it. And one time, he said it came over the carrier for a minute. Everything went off in the carrier. Everything shut down. Right in the middle of, landed planes and stuff, which is really dangerous because if the catapult's not working, you can really mess yourself up on one of those jets.
Mm-hmm.
And then they disappeared. He said they just come by every once in a while, like hello. He said one of them came by one day. He said it was funny. It was a saucer, got on the side of the carrier, and just started waving left and right, like it was waving at him, and then took off. He said it was so funny because he said you would see them streaking, and then it would come back and they would just disappear. He said it's got to be some kind of doorway, Joe. He said it's something. He said it's something that we don't know. He said because obviously they're not. He said either that or they're traveling at speeds that you can't see them anymore. He said that's got to be ungodly speeds. He said inside of an atmosphere. He said I don't even think they can do that. I said I don't know what they can do and what they can't do. But here we are, 36, 37 years later, and I know a lot more. But still, I have no idea. I have some idea, but why they want to come mess with us? What it is about humans they want to talk to, who they want to get involved with. Why screw with us? What is it that we have? I mean, is it literally something we have? Is it they just want to watch us evolve? And the more questions you ask, the more questions you end up with. You get very few answered, and it seems like when you do get an answer, it comes out to 8 more questions. Sometimes I'm thinking, why bother asking any questions if it's going to keep coming out to more questions? We found out a couple of things with agendas and stuff, and it just made for more questions. Then we found out it seems like we're not the only ones being taken. They seem to be taking people on other planets, bringing them on these ships, and letting us be introduced to them. So it's crazy stuff. But in the Navy, I know the Navy ships, and it's not just the carriers that get buzzed. I know destroyers that have gotten buzzed, fast attack craft that have gotten buzzed. I've heard submarines getting buzzed underwater. A good friend of mine was a number one aboard a submarine, I'm not going to mention his name of the sub, he said they cruising along one day and they thought there was a Russian ship. It's not uncommon for them to shadow each other underwater, play with each other, play games. He said they're cruising. I'm not going to say how fast because I'll be giving them top secret stuff. But anyway, they're cruising almost top speed, trying to get away from whatever it is. He said this thing kept gaining. And his captain said, what the hell is that? He said, the Russians must have a new sub that can keep up with us. Because at the time, they didn't have anything. At least we didn't think they had anything that fast. And he said, yeah. Then all of a sudden, sonar says it's on the side of them. And I can't say what it is, but submarines have some more advanced detection systems now than sonar. But anyway, it showed them running on side, and then when it scanned, it showed not the shape of a submarine. Then it got out in front of him, and it just left them. He said they tracked it. They could keep the track for about 8 or 10 miles. He said, but it was moving well over 200 knots underwater. That's, in case y'all know, a knot's 1.5 miles an hour, people. So you can do the math. That's 300 plus miles an hour, something cruising underwater. Yeah. As far as I know, nothing on any Navy, on any country can do 300 miles underwater. It's never even been heard of. I mean, most top speeds underwater rarely over 50 knots, which is about 75 miles an hour. So, people, it's slow, really. It's kind of strange how it works. And you might see some ships now that can cruise fast than that with the new bigger reactors, but nothing that's going to do 300 knots. There's just nothing in the Navy that can do that. And it just confused them. And, of course, they have to report it. They called it in. And they sent all the sonar and other images in from the other different kind of scans they do. But they still don't know what they are. And it pisses off these captains because they figure someone in the military knows what they are, and they just won't tell them. Yeah. I'm not even sure if anybody in the military knows what they are. I don't know. It's one of those things that's need to know. And, frankly, most captains just don't need to know. Yeah. And it's, there's no reason. As long as they don't attack the craft, there's no need to know. And they don't attack the craft. They'd screw with them, play with them. I do remember one sub commander said that one had left a wake. It made he said it made the submarine buck, like it was going through some kind of rough, like it was on top of the water and there was waves. It was the same thing underwater. He said it left some kind of wake underwater. He said, which is also unheard of. He said, but it made the ship rate vibrate and buck up and down as it was going through it, which freaked him out. This guy's a captain, been a captain for a long time. I mean, you don't get to be a submarine captain unless you're really, 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 really good. Yeah. They only put the best down there. And, most people don't even know most submarines have 2 complete sets of crews, because of the way they work. So I ain't going to say how long it works, but they have one crew, and then when they come in, the other crew takes over, the ship goes right back out. And that crew goes on break, and then when it's time up, the other crew comes back and goes on break, and that crew comes back. And that allows us to keep them submarines going all the time. Because we like keeping an eye on our friends like Russia and China. So, it's just one of those things we like to do. But it's scary to think that somebody out there has got something that just makes all of our equipment look like junk.
Yeah.
And like I said, at the time, the Nimitz was the most advanced ship afloat, and the sub I'm talking about at the time was the most advanced sub afloat. And still, it was like child's play. They had not even a chance against whatever these things were. When you listen to these pilots, even just recently, a good friend of mine who's an F-22 pilot, well, actually he's an F-35 pilot now, told me. He said this thing buzzed him at speeds that are just unheard of. He said, Joe, I was thinking, oh, maybe it's one of them DARPA new jets that do Mach 12. And he said when he got the scan back, this thing was traveling well over Mach 100 inside the atmosphere. He said, what the hell is that? He said, we ain't got no drones that can do that. We have nothing that can do that. He said, nobody on the planet has anything that can do that. He said, it just freaks me out. He said, I've been a pilot for a long time, and technically he's a Top Gun pilot. So, and when you hear these guys talk about it, you can hear the fear in their voices because it's something they knew if it went after them, they would be gone. There's nothing they could do about it. I mean, because all the weapon systems go off as soon as they approach. It used to be that the plane would go out, but I guess they've adjusted it since then. So they just kill the weapon systems, and they can float around, hover around, mess with them. And just like in World War II, when they used to come up on them and do loop-to-loops around the craft and go over the front and come back around the back, he said they're still doing that today. He said, but the Navy and the Air Force just don't report it to the media. They just keep it inside themselves. So it's one of the reasons they have certain programs that they've initiated for looking at. Most people don't realize that both the Air Force and the Navy have space programs. People don't even know that. The average, it's not classified, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, but the Navy and the Air Force have their own space programs, just like DARPA has its own space program. And you can bet your ass they're all more advanced than whatever NASA's doing. And, I was talking about this the other day with John Goodwin from Writers of the Future. NASA used to be my favorite thing on the planet. And NASA still is like my fifth now. But, these days, because of, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Virgin Airlines, I mean, these is Sierra Nevada, they're putting up advanced spacecraft, and half the time NASA ever could do it. And they're way better, way less problems. Nobody's getting killed. They're blasting things in space and re-landing them on the planet straight down with rockets. NASA could never do that. NASA had to build a shuttle to bring it back in and land it. And so these companies, and I said this when I used to host Wake Up USA 20 years ago, if you want to see the SPROS program really bloom, privatize it. And that's what's going on today. We're privatizing it. Yeah. And look, Elon Musk is planning on bringing us to Mars and building a colony there. I'm Charles. I'm sending you in my place, though, man. I got a ticket, but I'm sending you on my place. I don't know if I want to go hang out. There was 2 Martian missions I signed up for. I'm way too old, but there was one that was looking for 200 people out of where was it? It's one of the Scandinavian countries. I signed up. And they sent me a really sweet letter. Oh, you got way more skills than we need, but your age is you're a little old, and we don't know how you would fare on Mars. I'm thinking, what are you worried about? It's a one-way ticket. What do you care? You would think you'd want somebody who knew what the hell they were doing. You don't want none of these Z-Gennies or these millennials. They'd panic. I'm not going to panic. I'm going to have a good old time on Mars. And then I signed up with another company, but I knew when I signed up, it wasn't going to happen. Even though I have above top secret clearances, and which they appreciate, by the way. Still, at 58, they're kind of like, maybe if somebody falls out, we might call you. I want to just go over there and slap them in the head and shit. Yeah, let me go to Mars, people. Of course, my family don't think it's a good idea, but hey, it's a chance to go to Mars. I want to go, man. Shit, I'd love to be one of the first colonists. It might be some ETs living there.
Well, I mean, we all grew up with the Jetsons and things like that. We were all expecting flying cars and holidays on Mars by this time of.
Well, I was always told as a young man that you could expect flying cars and stuff by 2000.
Yeah.
Of course, we're not even close to. All right, we do have something you could call a flying car. Those ones that land, they're basically just big drones, is what they are. But and we're getting there. But Charles, I don't think we're going to see it in our life. Our grandkids might see it. I don't think we're going to see it. I just don't feel like the love is there. It's unfortunately, it's just not where it should be today. But it's like, a good friend of mine, we got into this discussion a while back about religion. and how much it slowed us down. Well, a group came out, one of the think tanks came out and said the Middle Ages probably set us back 500 to 1,000 years. There was two times though. There was when we switched over from BC to DC, they say that's what was going on back then probably held us back 500 to 1,000 years. And then in the Middle Ages, when religion was taken over and everybody was being burned at the cross, well, whatever they were being, or or when inquisitions were going on and all these books were being burned, that they say the burning of the Library of Alexandria probably set us back 500 years itself. And because of the stuff that was in it. From what I understand, the library contained more than 50,000 pieces of works there, and paper. Not even talking about sculptures. What else it might have been there? Just like the location of Atlantis and stuff like that. So unfortunately, you and I are suffering because of religion. And people, I'm not hating on religion. I grew up as a Catholic, so I'm not hating on religion. I'm not Catholic anymore. I'm not religious like that. I'm spiritual now. I'm not religious. I learned the difference between religion and spirituality. There's a difference. But they set us back. And because of that, you and I are not going to get to see things we should, like the Jetsons flying. Because, man, I want my flying car. Have you driven in traffic, man? It's screwy, man. I don't like driving sitting. I probably spent a quarter of my life sitting in traffic. It's just sad, but I'm ready. But ET seems to have stepped up things a little bit on abductions, but not as much in sighting. So I got a question for you. So 1950, 1960, 1970, we were getting tons of UFO pictures. Now here we are in 2021. Everybody on the planet's got a damn cell phone in their pocket with a camera on it, but yet the amount of pictures have gone down and not up. Why? I'm confused. Shouldn't there be more? I know why, but I'm confused on why people don't catch this more often. When I talk to ufologists, because technically I'm not a ufologist. I'm a abduction researcher. Ufologists are people who really study UFOs themselves, and even though I'm way more qualified than most people in the field to study, I mean, I got advanced degrees in electronics, advanced degrees in avionics. I've got advanced aircraft recognition because I was stationed on the USS Nimitz, and it's required for anybody on a flight deck. I've got facial recognition, facial software, body language. I got my private investigator's license, several other things besides that. And I'm really overly qualified to chase UFOs, but nobody in the field really has the degrees I have for looking for UFOs, which you should have. I also have amateur astronomy and what's the other one? Oh, I took a course on bias, but there's another one besides that. For some reason, it's going right out of my brain at the moment. But you really need to have all that if you're going to study UFOs, because you need to know what's flying around. And then on top of that, and I tell everybody this, and I'm going to tell it again, on my phone, on my laptops, I have aircraft monitor. People, you need to get this. This will tell you where any flight is at any time. And it's legal. It's not illegal. You can have it. It tells you military flights. With the military flights, it'll show you where it's going and where it's coming from, but it won't tell you. It won't tell you what it is. It won't show you the listing. But on commercial flights, it'll tell you listing, where it's going, where it is, when it took off, all kind of wonderful stuff. Shows you helicopters, other things flying around in the air. So you have that. I also have J-Track, which tracks all satellite movement in space. So when I see something, I can immediately go, oh, it's not an airplane. Oh, it's not a satellite. What the hell is it? Well, I went and took a course on air, shit, I can't get it out of my mouth. On it's anomalies in the air, things that could cause like weird flights, and I took a 2-year course on it. So really and truly, I'm far more educated to look at UFOs than anybody that's currently in the field looking for UFOs. But it's just I'm really more interested in why they're being taken than why they're flying around. Because I said this to Stephen Bassett, who's a friend of mine. We're never going to get to the truth chasing lights in the sky.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
Even if we can show you that it's not from here, it doesn't mean anything. People go, okay, well, all right. The only place to get the truth from, you're not going to get it from the government, so that only leaves you the aliens. So it only leaves you the people who are being contacted by the aliens. And let's be honest with that. Some of them people are quite flaky.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's a hard thing. When people tell me like stuff like, oh, they're here to kill us or they're here to save us. All right. They're here to enlighten us. And my favorite thing is with this is, oh, they really here to enlighten us? Are you living on the same planet I am? Have you took a look at our planet recently? I said, our planet seems to be getting less enlightened instead of more enlightened. I mean, we have become polarized as a planet. We used to not be that way.
Mhm.
We just, everybody's picking sides and holding sides and everybody's hating on each other. That's not going better. If they were here to wipe us out, let's be honest, it would have been much easier 2,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago
Mm.
or just before the last ice age when there was less than 2 million of us running around. It would have been easy to wipe us out. Drop a plague on a planet, anything like that. But no, they haven't done that. They haven't showed us any true enlightenment. And they haven't showed us any true. They're more observers. They're more physical observers than they are anything else. And what I mean by that is they physically get involved with us, but they are really more observing than they are anything. Because they could have gave the government advanced technology, any advanced technology. What scares me though is the fact that the turn of the last century, or I should say, the turn of the century before last would have been in 1900.
Mhm.
Germany was the most advanced country on the planet, not America, not anybody in Europe. It was Germany. Before World War One, Germany was by far the most advanced country on the planet. They seem to have had contact because between 1911 and 1913, they built 6 prototype saucers. Really? Yeah, I mean, come on, we were still riding on horses, and these guys over there building saucers. I mean, no, something was going on there. And then, of course, after World War II, the U.S. supposedly recovered a crashed Roswell. I think we crashed it. The evidence suggests that we crashed it. Like we recovered it from the Germans,
Mhm.
brought it over here, said, okay, maybe you had some contact with that. Said, we're going to try to learn how to fly this thing. And I don't think it was anything of consequence. I don't think it was like one of their warships or anything like that. It was probably like a shuttlecraft or a cargo ship because it didn't seem to have weapons on it or things like that. But what's interesting about that crash is, and people don't like to talk about this, there was 2 crash sites. There was a crash site at Mac Brazel's ranch where they found grays, and then there's the Corona crash, which happened on the same day, where they apparently found 3 human-looking bodies. They were all kind of melting at the time, I guess, from high exposure to radiation. But that ship was found intact. The Roswell was found in debris. Well, that suggested it was an escape pod that hit the ground and just, was torn apart. But any ship that can travel in interstellar space is not going to break up on impact. It's just not going to. It may penetrate and get deep into the Earth, but it's not going to break up because when you're flying through space, even a micrometeorite could rip through a ship.
Yeah.
Like, so if we tried to fly one of our shuttles or something like that, no way, it would break apart before it even got to light speed. It would disintegrate. So those kind of things kind of give you an idea. It's one of the things having advanced degrees because it helps you to understand impacts like that. So yes, I think we were flying it and screwed it up, and the Greys said, "Oh hell, we're getting out of here," and bailed. And of course, something happened, and maybe they bailed too fast, and it hit the ground and killed 2 of them, and one of them survived, and then the other ones just crashed and hit the ground. What's interesting about this is the fact that we had the craft because we know that the Greys can come take you from anywhere and anything. They can take your car, your boat, whatever you are. They can take you, your pets, whatever. But they didn't take that craft, which suggests that they wanted us to backwards engineer it because it was probably, again, not a warship of some kind. And then another interesting story that people don't catch, the Roswell newspaper put out a picture in their paper of what we would call today aircraft aluminum, fiber optics, and a microchip.
Mhm.
The chip they put on there looks like advanced microchip, probably even more advanced than what we're using today, but it's definitely some type of microchip. The things when you ever see fiber optics, it looked just like fiber optics, and the aluminum way it folded and bent it reminded me of aircraft aluminum, which is all things we didn't have in 1950, but it's all things we do have in 2021. So yes, we may have retrieved some of the technology for them because a good friend of mine who's a scientist, we got into a debate on the natural progression of silicon. So we went from the vacuum tube. Ladies and gentlemen,
Mhm.
if you're a millennial or Z generation, you probably don't know what the hell a vacuum tube is. Before solid state, we had vacuum tubes. They were glass tubes filled with stuff, and these acted as microchips. So you'd have to have a bunch of them, like your stereo or your TV would have
Yep.
30 or 40 of them in there. I know Charles, because he's my age, he knows what I'm talking about. But
Yep.
for the rest of y'all, it's a hard, even though they were made out of silicone because glass is silicone, it comes from sand. It's a big jump from a vacuum tube to a solid state microchip.
Mm.
It's not a natural progression. There should have been something in between, a step down or a step up. There isn't. There's just vacuum tube microchip. Um, Yeah, it does seem like we might have had just a tad bit of help there, maybe just a little bit. But I really don't think they're here for that. I don't think they're here to really help us. I think that was just something we lucked up on because the Germans had it and we recovered it, and there you go. It just scares me that they chose to give it to the Germans. Of course, the Germans weren't Nazis before World War One, or even during World War One. That was World War Two. But still,
Yeah.
they should have kind of had a glimpse at Nazis a little bit. The Germans a little bit aggressive. I mean, since they started two world wars, they might start a third one.
So the report that came out doesn't really tell us anything, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I made a bet with several of my friends in ufology because they were all on their radio shows saying all about how this is going to change everything. I said, "You're idiots." I said, "The government's not going to give us anything." I said, "I keep telling y'all, if you want the government to give us the truth, you're going to have to give the government amnesty because this is the big problem for all governments because people are being taken. So if you come out tomorrow, crazy old cracker Joe Biden comes out tomorrow. I don't even know half the time I don't even know if he realizes where he's at. But anyway, if he comes out tomorrow and says aliens are real, or the FBI or CIA or somebody comes out and says they are real, every person in this country who said there's been abducted is going to sue. They're going to want people to be put in jail. We're going to want to know why it was kept a secret.
Yeah.
All these people that's kept a secret, we're going to want them put in jail or something done with them. And that's what we're looking at. And so you're going to have to give the government amnesty. And you know what? Best I can tell is no one I talk to wants to give them amnesty. They want to know why they were allowed to take them. Well, people, if you're a contact, you're an abductee, I'm going to tell you something. Our government could not have stopped this any way it went. No government could have. It doesn't matter who they are. And it could be the British government, the United States government, Chinese. It doesn't matter who it was. None of these even today we couldn't stop them. Even with the advanced stuff we have today, we can't stop them. If we could, we would. We would love to shoot down a UFO and get our hands on it, but we can't. We just don't have the technology to do it. Maybe in 1,000 years, maybe in 2,000 years, we might, but today we don't. So when you go hating on our governments or the people involved in keeping these secrets, remember they were just trying to learn, just like we are, and they were trying to get things to keep our country safe and our allies safe. But in the end, it's just not going to work that way. So, trying to get something out of government people is a waste of time.
Yeah.
You should give them amnesty because at least we would get the truth, or at least what they would consider the truth. But right now, when they came out and said, "Well, we still have 144 cases unexplained, but we don't think they're aliens." So the first thing I said is, "Well, Blue Book had 800 cases. Project Signs had about 500 cases. Project Grudge had about 1,000 cases. That's about 3,000 cases unexplained. That sounds like aliens to me because nobody on Earth could do it." And remember, people, this goes back way back. So we're not even going to talk about way back in the old days. We're just going to talk about in the modern era. So in the 50s, this was going on. In the 40s, 30s, 70s, this was going on, and we had not a prayer of stopping this at all. And so, I mean, people, you should cut them a break. I'm not. I'm like y'all. I mean, the government's no good SOBs. I'm not going to argue about
Well,
that. But cut them a break because we might get some truth. That at least they might admit the fact that yes, we are being visited, but there's nothing we can do about it. I'm sorry, people. But then, like Roger told me, he's a heart facility. He said, Joe, but it's going to cause panic. Well, it's not going to cause panic in Britain. It's not going to cause panic in the United States. It might cause some in China. It's definitely going to cause some in India, but not a lot because the Indians believe in aliens. But when you get into South America and Africa, oh shit, it's going to cause some serious panic. People are going to be freaking out, and there'll be some people in the United States freak out too. But still, we need the truth. We need to start preparing ourselves for first contact. Whether it happens in 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, 500 years, or 5,000 years doesn't matter. We need to start preparing for it. As a society, we need to know we're not alone, and there is something out there that's bigger, brighter, and smarter than we are. But yes, they're not hostile to us. They could have took this planet over at any point. They haven't. So that tells you right there they're not here to exactly eat us, cook us, or anything else for that.
Yes.
Whoever sent me that, you idiots. I'm sorry. Somebody said, "Well, bet you we taste good." No, I don't think we taste good. They don't want to eat me anyway. I'm high in cholesterol. They don't want to eat me, so. And I'm old and tough and stringy and shit. So you youngins, if they're gonna eat anybody, it's gonna be you youngins. I better watch out. Oh Lord.
There was a sci-fi movie long time ago, and it was very much that the they make contact with the aliens, and it's really just sort of alien teenagers borrowing Daddy's flying saucer and having a bit of fun with this primitive planet they've found.
That's a scary part. It could be true.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
I tell people all the time because a good friend of mine who's in the government, he's way up in the government. He goes, over the years, I've managed to make some really high up friends in the government. Okay, where'd my mic go there? Okay, there we go. I've made some really good friends in the government, and the couple of trips I made out to D.C. for lecturing and for the X conference took me up some aides who put me in touch with some other. And then I met Senator McDonald, who connected me with some other people, and through my military connections I've kept over the years, I've made some really, really high up connections, and they worry about this. I mean, they seriously do worry about this. It's something that they don't like people penetrating our airspace, and that's another thing. See, this report hurts the government because now we're going to expect them to go chase these things because we're going to think it's Russian or Chinese. A lot of Americans are going to go, well, if it's not aliens, then it's Russian Chinese. Why aren't we out there shooting them down? I mean, one of them just hovered over D.C. for an hour, and before we even scrambled an F-16, which never had a prayer of even catching the damn thing. That was a funny one, Charles. In 1950, there was a sighting that was over D.C. And after about 30 minutes, we scrambled, I think, some P-5 Mustangs or something. And then 50 years later, to the same date, almost at the same time, I think it was in 2000, another one showed up in the same location and just sat there like it was a 50-year anniversary. And then we finally sent an F-16 up, but it never catch it. Now, I'll tell you a good one. The Belgium triangle sightings are great because it happened for several nights. So I was going to say to UN, who is it? NATO decided that they were penetrating their airspace, and we thought it was somebody else. So we sent a squadron of F-16s up. So they're flying out there. You hear the pilot. I can't use the language he was using, but it was like, oh, beep, 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 beep. It's a triangle, beep, 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 beep. What you want us to do, beep, beep. And the whole time you can hear the commander going, just don't shoot it, follow it, look at it, because it was just kind of floating. It wasn't. It kind of acted like a dirigible because it was just kind of just floating along. It wasn't even traveling any speeds, but it was big. I mean, the city in Belgium, it covered the entire city as it went over. It freaked out everybody who lived there. There's quite a few reports that came out about it. And this thing just hovered along. And the F-16 pilot's going, he said, I'm starting to feel strange, and my instruments are starting to get weird. And the other pilots got on the mic and said the same thing. And then all of a sudden, this thing was gone, just gone. And they were told to pursue it. He said, pursue what? There's nothing to be seen. There's nothing on radar. There's nothing around. There's nothing at all. Well, 2 minutes later, it showed up over another city. I think it was like 2,000 miles away on the other side of the continent. And they were like, well, we can't go there. You know how many countries have got to cross to go there?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. We're not going to just go flying around unless they're NATO countries. And It was a strange event. But those kind of things, when you get pilots that see stuff or policemen that see stuff, they're really good. They're really good witnesses. They pay attention to detail because it's their job. And when you hear these pilots talk about these things, they're stunned. They're like, well, if it's our enemies, we're done. And that's how you know it's not Putin. Putin's an aggressive SOB. I like Putin, by the way, but he's an aggressive SOB. And if he had these kind of weapons, America and Europe would already be conquered. We'd all be red Russians now. Same thing with Xi Jinping. I mean, if he had these kind of weapons, Russia would be conquered and all of Europe would have been conquered by now, probably the United States as well. So it's not theirs. It's not ours because we just decided to take over the whole world. So this is somebody outside source. Now, somebody the other day said, couldn't it be someone on our planet that evolved faster than everybody who's just here? Like, I guess they got that idea from the Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
Yeah.
Which, maybe Atlanteans. Maybe if Atlantis sunk to the bottom and it managed to survive, maybe it's them. But other than that, I just don't see it.
Yeah.
Because where were they, in the olden times? And a good, getting back to what I was saying earlier, the thing is, people, if you don't believe in UFOs, which only means unidentified flying object, think about it from this point of view. Man has only been in the air for less than 250 years when we invented the first dirigible. That was our first foray at air flight, and then the Wright brothers were in the 1900s. So really, we have only been flying for about 200 years. So anything before that, and Britain's great for this, by the way. There are several really nice pictures of London where these weird orb things would invade London. And several artists just sat outside and took pictures. When I took pictures, drew pictures of them.
Yeah.
And there's actually mentions in the like the mayor of the town at the time actually made a mention in his book, in his log. So we have those, and then we have all this great artwork throughout the Middle Ages of these things flying in the sky.
Hmm.
You know, so look, people, remember this. When you hear about something flying in the sky 500 years ago, it's significant because nothing was flying in the sky 500 years ago. And believe it or not, the ancient world knew the difference between meteorites and meteors and comets versus whatever these weird things were. One of my favorite stories is it's a Middle Eastern city. It had been under siege for 3 years. When this the shield thing saw it flew up the gate and just blew the gates open and let the soldiers in. So it took a side in this one for some reason, and it allowed them to get in. What's interesting about this is both the losers and the winners talk about this thing in the same exact way. They said this big silver shield came up to the front gate and just blew the whole entire gate out, and the soldiers came rushing in. It's an interesting story, but what the hell was it? We didn't have nothing was flying in the skies back then. Nothing. Birds. And there were no birds that big. Even a condor wasn't that big. And shit, last I checked, the condor was native to California. So I'm not even sure how it would have got over there. It's just when you hear stories like these, you know, and I always tell people if you're going to get into ufology or any of this stuff, start in the ancient world and work your way forward. Because you'll be surprised the Egyptians and the Sumerians and the Dogon go back 6,000 years, and they have these stories 6,000 years ago. So you know this phenomenon has been going on at least 6,000 years. Unfortunately for us, pre-Ice Age stuff has been wiped out, and it's hard to say. We do know there were cities pre-Ice Age because they just recently found that tsunami uncovered 2 cities in India that date back to 12,500 years, around the time of the Ice Age. So we know these things existed. We also know the water levels were quite lower back then because we keep finding these cities, these sunken cities. Like there's one off the coast of Cuba. There's several of them. So we know at one time the continent was much different, or the Earth was much different. So any of these civilizations could have been advanced. We just don't know. As far as we know, they could have been here, left, and came back. You know, when you talk about reptilians, you know, 65 million years ago, reptilians would have loved this planet. It would have been like home to them. So it's just a strange thing. But the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and the Dogon get into great detail about the visitors from the sky. All three of these all three of these races get into this, and it's worth reading, people. It really is. It's a lot of reading, don't get me wrong, and getting Sumerian text translated is a pain in the you-know-what. And I found out that some of it that David Icke had translated wrong when he's talking about Planet X. They were way wrong about that. It sounds like to me there was a large ship that had pulled up in orbit, was orbiting a planet about half the size of the moon. And I try to explain to humans if Planet X, because you know Planet X is supposed to be 5 times the size of Earth, it comes by every 3,600 years. If Planet X even gets close to us, it's catastrophic for this planet. We'll have tidal surges, earthquakes, tsunamis. It'll be a nightmare planet. Volcanoes will be going off all over the place because its gravitational force will tug and pull on us and destroy our planet, basically. And then there is the fact that neither the Chinese or the Egyptians or the Toltecs or the Aborigines the Aztecs have no mention of a planet coming by every 3,600 years. Remember, the Chinese have almost 6,000 years of astronomy. They don't show it anywhere coming by.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been by in the last 3,600 years or the last 7,000 for sure. So maybe if it was a planet, maybe that's what the asteroid field is between Mars and Jupiter. Maybe it got caught by the gravitational field and destroyed. But more than likely, what it really was just some kind of spacecraft that was coming by to visit, or maybe retrieve their citizens, you know, or something. Because a lot of people seem to think that something crashed here right at the beginning of Sumerian time, and was retrieved. Or wasn't retrieved. They started two cities because they couldn't breathe the atmosphere here, and then started the race of humans that we know today. Sort of. They said. They created slaves that looked like humans but weren't quite sentient like we were. And they said the reptilians, the Dogon, what's great about this is the Dogon and the Sumerians talk about this. The Dogon said they used to come here, steal the women, rape the women, bring the women back, and they would have children. And those children were born different. The first time I heard the story, I thought they meant that they were like disfigured or looked different, but that's not what they meant. They were born different. They were fully sentient because they wanted to know why were they plowing the field? Why we got to go plow the field? Why do we got to do this? Why don't y'all go do this?
Yeah.
And eventually they rebelled and Sumeria fell. But both the Sumerians and the Dogons talk about this, which is a strange thing that, the Dogons were a tribe living way up in a mountain top, that had broke off from the Egyptians, or maybe even there before the Egyptians. No one knows for sure. But they had advanced knowledge of all sorts of things, such as, they knew the orbit of Sirius A, B, and C. We didn't find B and C until recent times with radio telescopes. We didn't even know they existed. But their calendar, the Dogon's calendar, is based on a 55.5-year orbit of Sirius A, B around Sirius A. How the hell could they know that? I mean, they didn't even have writing at the time. Things like this are just hard to get around, I mean, they had advanced knowledge of the circulation system of the body. How the hell they knew that? I mean, they could show you how the blood circulated through the body from top to bottom. Now, come on, who the hell told them that? They didn't find that out through science. They didn't have the technology. They didn't have MRIs or any of that stuff at the time. So I'm totally confused about that. And then knowing that, and they knew the mass of Sirius A. They knew if you took a spoonful of off of Sirius A, that if you tried to bring it on Earth and dropped it, it would go straight through the core of the planet and come out the other side. How the hell could they know that?
Yeah.
I mean, unless somebody was telling them. I mean, I don't know how else they could know it. So those kind of stories you got to pay at least some attention to. Because they are stories that seem to be unthinkable on this planet, and the Sumerians talk about how these children kind of took back over. And then let's not forget, every human born today has a reptilian section in their brain. It's what makes us who we are. It's not just aggression. It's more than just aggression. People always think it's just aggression, but it's way more than that. It's just some of the things that help us to cope with life. And before that, we didn't have that. We were just a little slave race doing what we were told. At least that's what the Sumerians say.
That's been fascinating. Plenty of references there for people to look up. Thank you ever so much for your time. That was brilliant.
Thanks, Charles. I had a blast.
And that's it. A big thank you to our guest, Joe Montaldo. The truth may be out there, but the governments of the world are determined to keep it hidden. As the History Channel's Giorgio Tsoukalos regularly says, I'm not saying it was the aliens, but it was the aliens. This is Charles Christian saying thank you so much for listening in. Please join me again next week for more strange tales for strange times. Until then, stay well, stay weird. Goodbye.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon. Which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, folklore, and the paranormal. You can keep in touch with us online at www.urbanfantasist.com, by email to urbanfantasist@icloud.com, and on Twitter @urbanfantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Goodbye.